Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. So it's your host Terry coming to you from Springfield, Missouri. I'm here actually in the parking lot of a CVS. Now, before all of you rush out, all of you paparazzi and stuff rush out to like catch a glimpse of me or track me down to say hi, let me just say I think there's about 3 dozen CVS's in Springfield, because I actually passed like maybe 2 of them to get to this one. But the reason I came to this one is because my daughter, who actually crazy enough works for Rite Aid, set me up with a booster shot appointment because she knew I was going to be in Springfield today. So I appreciate her doing that. But I wanted to do a little history tonight. And it's a history not of coronavirus or COVID, but of smallpox. So, as many of you probably know, there was a huge pandemic of smallpox. And this, well, it goes back globally like 3,000 years. Like seriously, like mummies in Egypt had smallpox pustules on their corpses. But by the time of the revolution, so 1775, 1776, because keep in mind, April 1775 is the shot heard around the world. The Declaration of Independence doesn't come for another year plus in July of 1776, but we were already at war with the British. So smallpox was running rampant in the United States, and the fatality rate from smallpox was around 30%. So 3 of every 10 people that contracted the disease would die of it, and others would be left with terrible scarring. And so there was this procedure, which is kind of based on the name of the virus that causes smallpox, but the procedure was put together by this British doctor named Jenner, and it was called variolation. And variolation is not a vaccine. It's, I think the term we would use maybe is inoculation. And so many people in the States went through variolation. And if you ever saw the John Adams movie that Paul Giamatti starred as John Adams, there's a couple of scenes in there where he goes through variolation, and as does Abigail and I think their children. But what happened was, with variolation, you would get either a cut on your skin on purpose, and they would basically take this liquid pus from an active smallpox case and put it into your skin, so they would infect you. Or some people actually snorted this pus, like they would take it nasally. And you would get a lot of the symptoms of smallpox. However, you would typically not have a severe case, as severe as like a case where 30% of people died, and you would end up becoming immune to smallpox. Now, lots of people were doing this, and certainly lots of soldiers in the Continental Army had done it. But George Washington was skeptical about it. But he kept an open mind, and he realized that the British sometimes were sending people into the American or the colonials' lines with smallpox, hoping to infect soldiers. And you can imagine, you have this fledgling Continental Army trying to fight off these British oppressors, and you get a unit that's becomes And by the way, smallpox, like COVID, spread very rapidly. Very, very virulent disease. And so you can imagine if you're a military commander, you're like, man, if, you know, 2 of my guys get smallpox, we're all living here in tents. You know, we're around each other constantly, and, you know, sanitation was not what it was. People just didn't wash their hands. Like, that wasn't a thing. They just crapped in a hole in the ground, peed in the hole, you know, peed behind a tree, whatever. And so, you know, you can imagine an entire unit being not combat ready because of people that were very, very sick and or dying. And, you know, it should be noted that in a lot of wars, a lot of people died of disease. It's estimated that even during the Civil War, you know, tens of thousands of troops died of disease, you know, from wounds, but sometimes just dysentery or something that ran through a camp. That's why Clara Barton and the U.S. Sanitary Commission were so important during the Civil War, because they realized hygiene was a thing. Like, they had to teach doctors, basically. So anyway, getting back to Washington, eventually Washington comes around to be convinced that maybe variolation is a good idea for the Continental Army. But the problem with variolation is once you went through that procedure, you had to be quarantined for about 4 weeks. And so you couldn't just do variolation on, let's say, a company or a battalion of soldiers and then have them be quarantined and have the enemy knowing that you had all these soldiers that couldn't intermingle with other soldiers and were not combat ready. So the winter of 1777, which the Continental Army spent in Morristown, New Jersey, is when Washington first started doing this. And it was a big secret because they couldn't let the British know. They couldn't let the British know that guys were just restricted to camp because of variolation. And this continued through the winter, and then even through the winter of 1778, which was the terrible winter at Valley Forge. They continued to do this process with unit after unit to get the Army vaccinated and to prevent the spread of disease. And I want to read a quote from a British medical historian. And this guy's name is Hugh Thursfield, and he wrote this in 1988, so this is recent scholarship. He said, "I think it's fair to claim that an intelligent and properly controlled application of the only method then known of defeating the ravages of smallpox, which in the years 1775 to 1776 threatened to ruin the American cause, was a factor of considerable importance in the eventual outcome of the War of Independence." In other words, what he's saying is smallpox was such a big deal that it threatened the American Revolution, the success of the American Revolution. And he says it's of considerable importance to the outcome of the war. So Washington's decision to finally go ahead with variolation or inoculation was part of winning that war. And here's the thing, though, to keep in mind about smallpox. If you're younger than me, and I know there are a lot of people that watch the channel that are younger than me, because, I mean, as a YouTube sensation, I'm super popular with, you know, Gen X, Gen Y. If you were born probably in the 70s, or after, you may have never received a smallpox vaccine. Now, I was born in the early 60s. I've received a smallpox vaccine, and here's why. smallpox was, for all intents and purposes, eradicated in 1952 in the United States. But it wasn't globally eradicated. And then, well, just to give you an idea, so it wasn't eradicated in South America till 1971, China 1975, and the last, what they consider the date of eradication globally, wasn't until 1977. So I was already, I don't know, like a sophomore in high school by then, or junior or whatever. So this was something that hung around globally for centuries. And there are still cases that crop up periodically. But one of the things I've always thought of since 9/11 is, what if people that want to do harm to this country infect people with smallpox, send them across the border, have them fly into the United States, and then just go to major population centers? You know, lots of people have not been vaccinated. And by the way, the smallpox vaccine is not just like a shot. It actually leaves a round scar on your arm. Because what they would do is, and anybody who has had this will tell you this, and I'm pretty sure this is the smallpox, they would put a drop, a good-sized drop of liquid on your arm. And then they would stab it with a needle, like, until it all was absorbed into your skin. And so as a kid, you're like, what the hell? Come on, finish up. You know, so it was memorable. And I remember, my scar is not significant compared to like my mom's scar. I remember like when I would see my mom in the summertime, we lived in Florida, she'd have a sleeveless shirt on, and she had a scar that was about the size of a dime on her arm. And it was very noticeable. And women of her age, men of her age, they all had them, right? Because my mom was born in 1930, so like I said, 1952. So where does that bring us to today? How can we apply this history lesson to things today? So January 4th. January 4th is an important day. Why? Well, two reasons. One, it's one of my daughter's birthdays. But two is, that's the date that the federal vaccine mandate goes into effect for employers that have over 100 employees. So, if you're disinclined to get the vaccine, you got basically, tomorrow's the 4th, so you basically got 2 months to find a job with an employer that has less than 100 employees. Now, I've mentioned this before. At Prime, we have a lot of people who are independent contractors. They don't work for Prime directly. In fact, I got an invoice here from my headlight repair, and it has the company's name. It says my wife's company has to pay to Prime, you know, $258 plus $25 in labor, but that's what it costs. So that was a good outcome. I mean, like $280 or whatever. But you know, so I'm not an employee of Prime, but every mechanic, and I mentioned this before, when you see a company start to line up behind an idea and they offer incentives to do it, you might as well take the incentives, because they're going to make it mandatory at some point if they want to. Now, the thing about this mandatory, you know, this mandate is it's going to level the playing field. So companies like Tyson, who said, hey, you want to work for us, you got to be vaccinated. Well, now people are not going to leave Tyson and just go to some other big employer. Now, they might find some place that has 99 employees and, you know, but you got to ask yourself this. If there's a place with like 94 employees that the owners don't want to make people get vaccinated, do you think they're going to hire people? Because the second they go over 100, everybody's got to get vaccinated. I don't think that's going to happen if they're, disinclined to do that. So here's what's on the table. At Prime, everybody that works in those buildings that I was walking out of today, all the mechanics, all the people that work in the wash bays, driver lineup, whatever, right? Logs, everybody, those are all Prime employees. The other people that are Prime employees, of course, are all the company drivers. But the other people, so this is kind of an interesting group because they're kind of in flux, right? People that are in TNT are Prime employees. Until they get upgraded and decide to go lease or buy a truck or whatever, they're Prime employees. So if there's somebody that's like coming, to Prime that doesn't want to be vaccinated, just keep in mind, if you go through PSD, once you're a TNT, in TNT, you're a Prime employee until your status changes. Now, am I telling you that they're going to force you to get vaccinated? I don't know what they're going to do. I really don't. That's not a conversation I'm involved with. But I do know this. Most companies are probably going to have to show some kind of compliance. Now, I will tell you that there are going to be some governors and state attorneys generals. They're already talking about suing the federal government. It's not going to go anywhere. Okay, first of all, the federal government has done stuff like this before. Hours of service, that's a federal government mandate, and everybody just rogers up to it, even though some of us don't like it. There are a million things that are federal government mandates that employers have to do. Now, if you say, well, they can't make me get a vaccine, and that's true. And I've said that before. The federal government cannot force you to be vaccinated. Your employer can't force you to be vaccinated, but your employer can terminate you for that. And you're not going to have any recourse because, truth be told, 99% of us are at-will employees anyway. We can be fired at any time for any reason or no reason. So, look, Washington State fired their head football coach. This dude was the highest paid employee in the entire state. They fired him and a bunch of his staff members. Don't think it can't happen to you. This guy was he was a big deal, right? He was the highest paid employee. Lots of places are firing people who won't get vaccinated. And trust me when I tell you, no company is going to risk being fined by the federal government in order to protect somebody's right not to get vaccinated. So I don't know what's going to happen. Some people in the trucking industry are talking about, there's going to be less drivers, blah, blah, blah. But, and here's the interesting thing. Polls have shown that lots and lots of people who are not vaccinated say they're going to quit. But also people who have done these polls have basically said, but whether people will actually do it when it comes time, that's another question. Because January 4th is going to be here sooner than you think. And the question is, are people going to, quit? Because here's the thing about January. January's slow for almost every business in America other than hotels in Florida. So I wouldn't want to end up out of work in early January because, while there are lots of jobs available, a lot of companies are going to be in the same boat as your employer if you fall under this. So we'll see what happens. But again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking that courts are gonna overturn this, because it's just, there's no precedent for it to be overturned or to be even granted some kind of injunctive relief. So anyway, so that's our history lesson for tonight, and the news that came out about the vaccine today. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all our subscribers. And by the way, I'd love to get to 1,000 subscribers, and in order to sweeten the pot, I'm going to make this offer. Whoever is the 1,000th subscriber, they will receive, upon completion of a package of information and submission to our crack team of contest control people. They will receive an all expense paid trip to either Pittston, Pennsylvania, Springfield, Missouri, or Salt Lake City, Utah. I promise that. And once you get there, you'll get to meet lots of really nice truck drivers, and you'll have a chance to get in one of these big rigs. So, you know, you want to subscribe. You want to be part of the fun here. So anyway, take care, be safe, and I will be talking with you soon. Bye.